The article that I read was Technology's Greatest Value by Randy L. Bell and Glenn Bull. And my name's Mr. Hogan. Let's go ahead and summarize this article. There was this guy who was an educational materials developer named William Flom. And he observed some classrooms and he found that technology use was less than desirable. So he summed it up into 5 categories, the negative things that he saw. The first one was computer as a teaching machine. He observed in a few classroom students using skill building games, intervention activities, simulations, and test prep materials, mostly in the lower grades and often, in his opinion, ineffectively. With rare exception, the computer, when used this way, was intended to temporarily relieve the teacher of some teaching task. I'm sure we've all seen this in the classroom in our observations, and and the whole point of this article is going to be we just need to make sure we are using technology in the classroom effectively and not just relying on it to fill in the gaps. Another thing was computer productivity tool. Most often, especially in middle schools and high schools, Flom found students using computers as a report writer, presentation giver, digital graphics tool, and communications hub. In some cases, teachers were convinced that the PowerPoint presentation students created taught them much about the target content, but most often, student thought and energy seemed to be going into exploring the mechanics of the software instead of the content. I'm sure we've all experienced this when we're doing a PowerPoint presentation. We're just copy and pasting and putting information in there. The third one was computer as an internet portal, and the issues with that. They had access to information, sometimes information they could not. In 92, National Science Teachers Association, technology greatest value found within the school's 4 walls. So that was just like pointing out that they were looking at content that they shouldn't have been. The most exceptional activity observed was students creating their own web pages based on the material drawn from a list of pre-qualified websites. In my current assignment for observation, when we do labs, there is usually a research station that they have available. Computer as a test giver was the fourth one. This is something that actually he does like, but he just didn't see it very often, and I guess he didn't like that. And computer as a data processor. A few administrators Flom spoke with viewed the primary role of computers as providing the data that drove their curriculum administrative decisions. So, those were the 5 things that he saw. Most of them were really not that great. So, technology in schools has, at best, tended to support traditional instruction rather than rising to its potential to transform the ways teachers teach and students learn. This just was anything here in the pink were quotes that I particularly liked. Again, this gets back to the whole point of the article, really, which was just making sure we have content-driven technology use. Using technology effectively in the science classroom is probably the main part of this article. So, another quote, technology should be used to facilitate data collection and analysis to enhance scientific understandings through imagery and visualization and to extend inquiry through communication and collaboration. That's just the ideal. That's what we're striving for. So he had a few pointers to use these guidelines in particular. The first one was keeping the focus on the science content. That's the very first thing, rather than the mechanics of the technology. So instead of just copying and pasting, we really want to make sure the kids are understanding what's going into their PowerPoints and so on and so forth. Second point was using technology in ways that are consistent with appropriate pedagogy, including opportunities for inquiry learning. I'll get to that a little bit later. Using technology in ways that allows teachers and students to do what would otherwise be difficult to do without technology. So really, big part of that's going to be research. We can definitely more effectively access research materials nowadays than we could in the past. And just really like we do at the college level, just teaching students how to use that to their advantage with efficiency. Fourth one was taking advantage of technology's power to engage student participation and interest. In science, sometimes we can, I don't know, dumb down the material, make it less interesting. I mean, science is really cool. That's why I'm a science teacher. That's why many science teachers are science teachers. Sometimes it takes a little spark of creativity to get these students to want to learn it. I know that's how it was for me. And sometimes we discover that on our own. And I think technology is a great access point to allow students to find that. Essentially, technology use in the science classroom is most effective when it encourages deeper student engagement with science content. This kind of harkens back to the inquiry-based science teaching. So when we can get kids to ask their own questions and actually want to dig deeper and look into the material, technology, again, I think is a great access point for that. Some other important considerations with technology in classroom. The National Science Education Standards placed inquiry at the heart of science and science learning. Really, I think that's one of the biggest, most important things as a science teacher that we need to remember. I don't always see this in my observations as often as I would like. I think we want to do it, but it tends to be hard to rally a class around one particular thing, and maybe classroom management is an issue, but I think definitely we should always strive to place inquiry at the heart of science and science learning. In addition to doing inquiry, the NSES, which I think nowadays it's the NSTA, also emphasize developing understandings about inquiry as an essential component of scientific literacy. It's not just about learning, it's about actually understanding the material. I think one of my core philosophies, you don't learn anything you don't really want to learn. So another thing to consider is how we use the technology. Still, the way in which these resources are used is critical. Using the internet as a convenient source of authoritative information is no better than using the textbook as the final authority. Neither approach emphasizes scientific inquiry as a powerful way to build knowledge. Again, I just want to go back to that copy and paste metaphor that I was using for PowerPoints. Consider how we use technology. The bottom line is that it's not about the technology, it's about how teachers use the technology. Even with all of the promising new technologies available today, the teacher is still and always will be the most important part of the equation. It is our job as teachers to guide these students in the right way and have these goals and teaching objectives and effective, using various teaching effective teaching strategies. It's all really important. We can place the kids in front of the computer and say, "Hey, do this," but if we don't do our job, they will not do it effectively. All right. Science educators could clearly make important contributions in preparing young citizens to use this evolving resource effectively. Just a good quote to sum up that aspect. All right, looking to the future. There's a small little bit at the end of the article talking about where we could go with using technology in the classroom effectively. This was just the best bit, I think, that summarized it. So, creative teachers may discover ways to use, for science purposes, the data acquisition capabilities in many cell phones. I highlighted this because I really want to do that. I found lots of great apps on my phone that can record accelerometer data and can record, like what various weather data conditions while being able to take notes. I found map tools for field work and all kinds of great stuff. Another thing is science teachers can take educational advantages of students' interest in photographing and filming themselves. Like, this actually uses MySpace as an example, which is funny because nobody uses MySpace anymore. This shows its age. Anyway, though, I think that's enough. I highlighted because I also want to use that. I think allowing students to take more control of their technology use in an effective way for collaboration and critical thinking is very important. One of the things, like, in our classes, oftentimes we'll use discussion boards on Blackboard, but kids don't always have access to tools like that in the school because those things cost money. But we could use private groups on Instagram or Facebook to allow student engagement inside and outside of the classroom. I think remembering those tools can be used effectively and are not just distractions is something we should keep in mind. All right, this is going to be the last slide. We hope I think it was literally the last line of the article. I thought it was a good summary. We hope we have given you some tools for determining when the cost is worth the learning that will result. The cost they're referencing is, the actual cost of technology. This immediately made me think of a time when I was a freshman in college, way back when, and I was required to buy this silly remote for the class, and the idea was that we would use it to encourage classroom engagement and ask questions and stuff, but it just ended up being a distraction. It wasn't useful. We hardly ever used it. It was like an $80 tool. It was a complete waste of money. I never used it in any other class ever. And so I think that this quote is something we should definitely remember when we're evaluating the use of technology. So, all right. Well, I hope you enjoyed my summary of this article. In the description, I will post a link to it and in a Google Docs file. So, see you later.